Fossil fuel loyalists fight Indigenous Congresswoman Deb Haaland's nomination to oversee our natural resources and tribal relations. I'm Yoonj Kim, and this is MTV News Need to Know. Representative Deb Haaland, a 35th generation New Mexican, is inching towards becoming the next Interior Secretary. This is hugely significant not only for making history as the first Indigenous woman in a presidential cabinet, but also because it would put her in charge of the very department that has systematically exploited Indigenous people for hundreds of years. However, fossil fuel loyalists are doing everything they can to halt her ascent. Haaland, who is committed to the push towards 100% clean energy, is vehemently opposed to drilling and fracking in the over 480 million acres of protected lands and 526 reservations that she would oversee. She also supports Biden's promise not to immediately get rid of fossil fuel jobs. As Julian Brave Noisecat wrote in Politico, "For American Indians, the nomination of Haaland has a special symbolic power. It strikes some as a rich irony that Republicans are now describing her as an existential threat to their way of life." For example, during her confirmation hearings with the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources, Utah Senator Mike Lee, who wants to minimize public lands for fossil fuel work, complained to her about the size of his state's national monuments, including Bears Ears.
The Pueblo Indians' ancestral homeland is there, and I realize it covers a very wide space.
I appreciate you paying the compliment, my state, but the monument designation doesn't make them more beautiful. It does tend to make the communities that don't support them impoverished.
To be clear, Lee is saying that protecting so much land in his state from the oil industry has quote-unquote impoverished his people. And the fact that he's mansplaining how the government controls his land to an Indigenous woman is unbelievable, given our government's genocidal history with Indigenous Americans. And it's not just that she's a Native woman. She's a Native woman who could get in the way of their money. Mike Lee has hundreds of thousands in campaign contributions from big oil, and together, Republican members of the Senate Energy Committee have solicited over $4 million in direct campaign contributions from the oil and gas industry. The previous administration rolled back at least 125 environmental safeguards. And under the Clinton, Bush, Obama, and Trump administrations, the Interior Department was responsible for problematic environmental projects like the Dakota Access Pipeline running through Standing Rock Sioux territory, an Arizona border wall desecrating sacred lands of the Tohono O'odham, and uranium mining, which has been linked to cancer in Apache communities. As Secretary of Interior, Haaland would be taking over the federal government's oversight of these projects. And as all of these projects show, Indigenous people are at the forefront of the environmental fight. So Haaland's appointment would be doubly significant because the department also houses the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which has historically had a complicated and sometimes contentious relationship with Indigenous people. It was first built to wage wars against them, forcing Native kids into assimilation schools, taking away their languages, and even beating them. And the suffering of Native people at the intersection of capitalist interests continues today. Oil pipeline projects are directly correlated with violence towards Indigenous women who face a murder rate of 10 times the national average. Aisha Gomez, a U.S. representative from Minnesota, where the Line 3 pipeline is being built, tweeted, "Indigenous women have been warning us about the way that violence against the earth and exploitation of women and girls are twin features of the extractive economy. There is no honest way to support Line 3 and care about missing and murdered Indigenous women." Given Haaland has spearheaded bills like Savannah's Act and the Not Invisible Act, which seek justice for missing and murdered Indigenous women, she might actually be able to do something about the longest-running murder epidemic in this country as head of the Interior. And the Interior Department was founded to protect Indigenous people and the land, but the records show it has failed miserably in both regards. So her nomination would not only be a win for Native representation, but a step towards atonement for our country's original sin by restoring the first people of this land to their birthright. I'm Yoonj Kim, and that's what you need to know.